I'm Bishop Gregory Parks. Welcome back to Take 5, a weekly conversation on faith and life. Very pleased to have with us today Father Ralph D'Elia. Father Ralph serves currently as my priest secretary in the bishop's office, as well as chaplain at St. Petersburg Catholic High School. He's also a moral theologian, having earned his degree in moral theology in 2020 from the Pontifical Gregorian University in Rome. Father Ralph, welcome to Take 5.
Thank you, Bishop. It's good to be with you.
Well, it's great to have you here. Wanted to speak with you today about a topic which is not always easy to talk about, but I think it's a very important and relevant subject, and that's end-of-life issues and what our Catholic faith teaches us about that. Maybe as a starting point, we could talk about the whole issue of suffering and what the Catholic Church teaches us as Catholics about suffering, particularly at the end of our lives.
Yeah, of course. So the issue of suffering is obviously one that's very difficult to deal with because, of course, suffering is something that we don't enjoy. But we see a model in Jesus Christ of what redemptive suffering looks like. And so we're called to unite our suffering with the suffering of Christ because we recognize that there's value. Perhaps if we don't recognize it now, we know that there's value in eternal life, and there's value in uniting our suffering to the cross.
Yeah, that's very well said. And I think when we have a loved one or somebody that we really care about, a spouse or a grandparent, and we see them suffering at the end of life, kind of our first thought might be, well, what can we do to alleviate that suffering? The Church makes a distinction between what we call ordinary means or treatment and extraordinary means or treatment and procedures. Could you maybe just briefly talk about the difference between those two things?
Yeah, it's an important distinction to make. And of course, when we talk about suffering, we recognize that as Christians, we're not masochists either. So we're not called to suffer unnecessarily. And so the Church would make the distinction between ordinary means of care and extraordinary means. So ordinary means of care would be providing pain medications, for example. Providing food would be an ordinary means of caring for someone. So various things like this. Extraordinary means are those means by which someone is being kept alive artificially.
Yeah, no, that's very true. What would you say, Father Ralph, to a family right now who might have a loved one who's in the hospital or is suffering with a terminal illness and is maybe on life support, and they're struggling with that decision? I know in myself, I'm sure yourself, you've been in hospital rooms with families when they're trying to make the decision on what the best thing is to do for their loved one. What would you say to them today to give them some advice or something to think about as they're making those decisions?
I think the most important thing is to seek assistance. The Church offers a variety of different resources. I was always grateful when people would come to me to ask me for advice, to pray with them first and foremost, and I think that's what we have to focus on in those times of difficulty is turning to the Lord in prayer. But then to look at the resources that the Church has, to be in consultation with not only the doctor, but with your priest and with those who understand well the teachings of the Church so that you could be guided as you make those tough decisions.
Yeah, so where would Catholics go for resources if they wanted to learn more about the Church's teaching on end-of-life issues and maybe find some guidance or support as they make those decisions for their loved ones?
Yeah, one of the best resources that's probably most concise would be the ethical and religious directives that guide Catholic healthcare. And it gives very specific points on what's acceptable and what's not acceptable based on what the Church teaches. Now, of course, these are meant for hospitals, but they can also be a helpful resource for people who are making those tough decisions. The Catechism's obviously a very helpful place to go. The popes have spoken very beautifully about these various issues in various capacities. And so there are a lot of resources just going on the internet, of course, making sure that you're looking at the right places. You want to know what the Church actually teaches, not what someone thinks the Church teaches. But there are a lot of good resources out there. But probably just going to your parish priest, too, and talking about these things with him, he's going to be able to point you in the right direction.
Yeah, I think that's great advice. Well, Father Ralph, thank you very much for being with us today. As I mentioned at the beginning, you're my priest secretary. Maybe we could do a Take 5 episode on what that's all about one day as well.
I think people might enjoy that.
But thank you for your ministry and all that you do here in our diocese.
You're welcome.
That's it this week for Take 5. May God bless you.